What's poppin' people, with your boy Zero, aka Black Natsuki Subaru. You already know by the intro, you already see the title. Today we are going to be reading ReZero web novel Arc 9 Chapter 28, A Stanza of Legend. Now y'all know this, y'all know how it goes. Motherfucker Wilhelm been ore farming like a motherfucker. So you already know that I'm bricked up, you're bricked up. Let's be bricked up together as we watch Wilhelm dual wield and fight Volcanica, bro. Let's get right into this shit. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well so you can stay updated on when I make videos, content, and all that good crazy shit. Also, remember, share this video with all your homies that may be interested in listening to some ReZero Arc 9 readings. Just ReZero content in general. Recommend it. Share it. Anyway, so I know this is gonna be a doozy, so okay, hold on. Let me take the first swig. Man. I know this is about to be crazy. Indubitably, that had been a stanza of a battle that would go on to be told in legend. Yo, they're already starting it off with fucking heat. The sword demon's twin swords, capered, and the divine dragon's dragon claws stirred up a gale whilst moving to intercept. Reigning supreme over all other existences, dragons were born as ultimate life forms. The divine dragon possessing abilities outstanding even among that species, its talent, its fangs, its scales, all were artifacts that ought to be considered sacred treasures of nature. Upon each occasion, the tremendous power it concealed was brandished. The wind would rise death throes. The heavens would be rent asunder. The world carrying a newfound heat would be perceivable. Even basking in a single direct hit would make the continuation of combat unfeasible. A method to prevent those dreadful sacred treasures from being wielded to the fullest, indeed, resided within the sword demon. The impetus for the divine dragon making an appearance before the sword demon. And that's such a sick name, bro. Your title is the sword demon. Hey, yo, bro. And I like how, you know, if you guys really think about it, from the earlier arcs when we were getting more exposition and explanations about the inner thoughts of Teresia, and she was getting whispered to by the sword god. This is the sword demon. Oh my god, bro, it's so good, so good. I'm gonna be fucking going so wild in this recording. Just so y'all know, So if you guys are hyped, leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite part is gonna be. Just leave timestamps of when, like, okay, this is my favorite part, blah blah blah. Anyway, that had been the peril befalling the girl who bore the same features as the lineage of the Lion Kings. That girl had been present within the room in which the bout had broken out, attentively watching over the battle without holding down her hair, flapping by the updraft of the wind. Maintaining that girl to the rear, the sword demon positioned himself such that she would get caught up in the destruction wrought by... The sword demon positioned himself such that she would get caught up in the destruction wrought by the divine dragon. You mean wouldn't? By doing so, the divine dragon, fearing harm may befall the dame for whatever reason, was made unable to display its full strength, thus alleviating the footsteps of death's domain from encroaching upon the sword demon to some extent. Ergo, the sword demon abandoned his position of keeping the girl to his back and personally closed his distance with death's dominion. To a rampaging tempest of destruction and annihilation, he exposed his own self, nary a lifeline save the dual implications of steel sized in both his hands and threw himself toward the precipice of doom, with even the slightest of missteps meaning his life would be forfeit. By using the battleground to one's favor, by taking advantage of the opponent's emotions, it was indeed possible to edge towards victory. But that was inelegant. And beyond being inelegant, it was extremely impertinent, unbeneficial, and futile. A victory stolen through underhanded means, rather than skill, to make up for swordsmanship that was lacking. What value could such a thing possibly hold here and now? The sword demon was a man who had lived on the battlefield. The existence of battles fought for the sake of survival. Of history untold by any save the triumphant victors, survivors. Of defeats and deaths that could not be excused. Of these he knew all, by virtue of the weight of his victim's blood clinging onto his soul. However, the current time was different. Nay, from this moment forward, in all the clashes the sword demon would grip his blade, doing battle against individuals through his steel. There would be no meaning in stolen victory. Through his swordsmanship, he would force the surrender of the one again whom he possessed the greatest need to emerge triumphant. Along that journey, the sword demon had not the time to squander on detours. If he was going to forge his old, withering body into the steel it had once been, he could not squander his time on anything but steeping his soul in the most scorching of heats. At the raging blow of the sword-like wind, the dragon's claw peeled and sliced, danced through the air, cramped. In order to swing his swords, in order for the divine dragon to wield its tail and fangs to the fullest, this battleground was far too cramped. The sword demon's heels exploding, his shimmering swords flashed at a speed that cosigned all notions of sound and wind to oblivion, piercing into the chest of the dragon and causing the space around them to burst asunder. The dragon scales, their hardness was greatly influenced by the agreed amount of mana possessed by the individual. The mightier and longer lived the dragon, the more robust and tenacious they grew. Henceforth, in regards to the divine dragon who reigned supreme over all others, its draconic scales were of a hardness that surpassed even diamond. Against those diamond dragon scales, the sword demon relentlessly swung its steel, repeating attacks of the striking, slashing, and stabbing variety. Even after all that, the steel in his grip was in prime condition, specially prepared for the sword demon to accomplish this goal. The twin swords, Trias, were a masterpiece of the same swordsmith that had forged the renowned blade Astrea, with which he bore a deep connection. Their handles fit comfortably in his hands, and integrating their weight with his body, the sword's shimmer traded blows with diamond, still unchipped. In regards to the sword demon's furious onslaught, the divine dragon was not one to allow itself to be ravaged unceasingly like this. Even if the mind concealed within was not the original, there was no hesitation in exerting the ability of what could be called the strongest dragon husk in the world. Thus, the divine dragon manifested might on the level of a natural disaster, as if elementary. To transform the shape of the world, to append onto reality any conclusion in accordance to what it deigned, forcing its showing upon the stage, was the right bestowed upon the divine dragon by Odd Lagna, unmistakably. A roar shattered the sky, dragon claws cleaved the earth, dragon scales repelled the sword demon's fullest wrath 100 times over, and the draconic aura emitted from the entirety of its body stained the royal capital's atmosphere in the hue of the divine dragon. The tail slammed down, striking the aged sword demon true. Nay, the sword demon had thrust the tip of his sword into the tail to evade the strike, but immediately dashing up its length, drawing near to the throat. An intercepting roar. Light tore to smithereens head on. Oh, A decapitating glint flashed. With the dragon scales on its shoulders, it deflected, instantly poising itself to go again. The clash began anew. They are cooking right now. They are absolutely cooking right now. 10 minutes in, nothing but fucking smoking hands. Damn it. I don't know, chat. That's some good shit. Unfurled wings becoming as if blades. The divine dragon ushered in a gusty storm of swords that carved up the royal capital. As the sword demon slipped through the gale, the former drawing a band of blood, the tail slammed to align with its trajectory, carving with its death's domain. The echoing tremors of demise, the sword demon's body was furiously blown backwards. A direct hit. Falsehood. As upon perceiving its unavoidable nature, the sword demon had aligned himself with the revolution of the tail, and from his fingertips, his ankles, his knees, his lips, his lumbar, his ribs, his shoulders, his neck, and the top of his head, he released all strength, allowing the lethal impact to pass through his entire body, as he flew, and flew, and flew. Slamming through 1, 2, 3 buildings, the sword demon drove his sword into the ground and lifted his visage. His fighting spirit was not shaken in the slightest. Thereupon, the divine dragon's breath took the form of a corona and drew near. A flash of swordly shimmer. The sword demon cleaved through the breath's cusp, forcing his body through the meager gap that had only been formed, and reached salvation from the scorching light, waiting in the open air. Then did the divine dragon beat its wings, swooping down to mercilessly snap the maw at the sword demon. Dragon fangs, boasting durably and sharpness that exceeded even that of draconic claws, moved in to sink into the flesh of the sword demon. Perfectly aligning the tips of both his swords together, the sword demon created a support brace that prevented the jaws from snapping shut. Supposing he had instead aimed the tips of the swords towards the maxilla and mandible respectively, the jaw would have closed, crunching his life to naught. It was his sense of smell that rejected death. Nay, his avariciousness to seize victory that had prevented that, thus prolonging his life. With the sword demon captured in its unclosing maw, the divine dragon abandoned its efforts to plunder his life by means of its fangs. Given a power click of its tongue, the dragon gave birth to an explosion within that space and struck the sword demon's body true. As blood spurted forth from his ears, from ears left and right, his ruptured eardrums and the semicircular canals within each quivered. Gnashing his teeth, the sword demon stood his ground as the dragon's tongue extended to strike him, launching him outside its maw. Out towards the skies, the high skies of the royal capital, defenseless. During his capture in the jaws, the sword demon had been carried off to the sky by the flapping wings of the divine dragon, jostled around by the wind in freefall, bereft of the means with which to counter. His altitude high as to cause those faint of heart to swoon upon a mere downward gaze, he faced straight toward the ground, descending in a swift, unceasing motion. Were he to continue and descend in this manner, Sword Demon thought he might be. He would not escape harm's way. Between a human who lived on the ground and a dragon permitted to lord over the skies with its large build, that was the definitive. But even in a situation that appeared as a decisive blow, the divine dragon did not abandon the sword demon to chance. The dragon greatly inflated its lungs to ready a breath, the release of which would give rise to tremendous damage to the sprawling royal capital below, shattering the endeavor to abstain from killing. No, the noble district directly below had been evacuated. Somebody, having established this place as a battlefield beforehand, had evacuated every residence liable to being caught up in the damage, thus constructing this arena. He regarded that skillfulness with admiration and gratitude. The breath unleashed was greater and more sweltering than before, blitzing towards the sword demon as infernal heat. The sword demon, unable to even look straight at the white light as he was, and possessing not the wings or the methods with which to resist the force of gravity, would have no choice but to receive the blast directly. That instant, below the sword demon, as he revolved his body mid-air, foothold hastened. One of the buildings the sword demon had slammed through before ascending to the sky, the tall time tower, intercepted the path of the plummeting old swordsman, functioning as a foothold for the sword demon. Bending his knees, the sword demon landed on the tower, held his twin swords tightly, and gazed to the sky. Across the breath, the sword demon and divine dragon exchanged glances, and that instant, a beautiful flash of sword clash head on with the white light. A chain of sounds akin to water's surface being licked, to the shattering of fragile glass, and the corona was split asunder from within. The divine dragon's breath it was, and in it dwelled both the power and the right to engulf the many things it coiled with, flaying their outer layers and stripping off the profound to lay them bare. Nonetheless, the sword demon had ignored all that in its heart's content, as it was thrust before him, cleaving through the light with a brandish of his blades, as something truly pure, allowing no interference from the wicked. The sword flash beautifully bisected all. As the breath severed as it was, radicated across the surface, it demolished the noble district of the royal capital, leveling it flat. The tower stood on by the sword demon, which had become the inciter of the explosion, and the crimson mansion under the protection of the divine dragon were the only things to have escaped direct harm. But all else had learned that tremendous degree of the dragon's power. The aftershock of the white light has stained the sword demon with white soot, jumping off the crumbling tower, and the divine dragon flapping its wings, still continuing to exert its hostility from the heavens. Between ground and the sky, their gazes crossed, and then a swirly aura surging forth rather than reaching its limit, and draconic pressure compelling aught to surrender, clashed anew. All living things in the royal capital of Lagunica, organic or not, shuddered. Why they keep making this man aura farm like this, bro? Dude, what the fuck, bro? Dude, it's been nothing but heat. It's been nothing but absolute heat. Oh, goodness. Bro. I'm just gonna say, like, dude, if you guys are locked in, let me know in the comments. Like, it's been nothing but gas, bro. So, not to do you like flowers, bro. Nah, bro. Like this, yo, Wilhelm's about to fucking cook. Dude, if Wilhelm beats, dude, if Wilhelm beats Volcanica, bro, we're gonna do we're gonna do an alcohol mukbang on the gym. Oh my god. And no one's gonna know why, and I'm not gonna explain why, but if Wilhelm beats Volcanica, we're going to do an alcohol mukbang on the channel. God damn it. That is ridiculous. This is actually fucking heat. Dude, It has been nothing but fire this whole arc, bro. Like, I'm not gonna say it's arc 6, but right now, low key, arc 9 is like kind of tied with arc 4 for me for being second favorite arc. Hana, Husky. Amidst a world hazed in white, audible was the voice of a lovely woman, her back towards a bed of yellow flowers. The world mishappened by the draconic aura. Wilhelm spun his body through the advance of the fatal zephyr, and as he brandished the gleaming swords carried in both his hands, a multitude of reminiscences flowed within himself. Have you come to like flowers? A lovely woman she had been. Drawn to her at first sight, the foolish man had placed a lid over those sentiments unfamiliar. Yet still, as their relationship went unsevered, Wilhelm had indulged in that environment, fearful of cutting too deep into it, immersing his body and soul in moments of laxness, of terrible, oh most terrible timidity, neglecting the time went by. To swing the sword to protect someone, I think that's nice. I hope that's him. His hometown enveloped in a blazing inferno. A sword flashing with beauty had delivered Wilhelm from the clutches of death. The woman had harbored no desire to take up the sword, yet nonetheless was loved by the sword. The reality that had conferred her with a reason to swing the sword filled Wilhelm with myriad anger. His soul, a conflagration born of repudiation. Towards weakness, towards the secrets, towards his own inadequate being, anger. Cleaving through the anger entire, overpowering it, by devoting his everything to the act of channeling that violent sentiment into his blade. At last, he attained the right to stand before her and cross swords. And thus, he had rescued the lovely woman from the abominable sword god, making her his own. Are you in love with me? Nay. Was it that he had made her his, or had he been made hers? He knew not the answer. But they had been happy. They had been fortunate. From the very moment he had met Teresia, to the very instant he had lost her, Wilhelm had continued to be blessed to the greatest possible extent. The death of Teresia was unmistakably a tragedy. Unable to even exchange words of parting, failing to convey the words he ought to have imparted, Wilhelm had been dominated by grief and lamentation. Amidst his despair, by overlooking much, he had erred. But the days he had spent with Teresia for Wilhelm had been those of happiness. That joyous time shared between the two, was it really something that could conclude with it all being ruined, fading as if its entirety had never even occurred? The moment it had come to an end with a single day of tragedy? Even if its color had faded in transience, could he truly remain without ever desiring that it ripened with flesh color once more? Decidedly, that could not be so. So that Teresia's death, that her life would not come to an end alongside a tragedy, he sought vengeance. Thus, if swinging his sword for Teresia had returned color to those days, then he desired to return color to a similarly dulled scene, unceasing in his struggle to do so. A raging gale, the savage roar by the divine dragon unleashed, stabbing the tip of his sword into the dragon's ire as it immolated the world white. He sliced it apart, as ever there, Beyond the cleared vision, he witnessed the blood-curdling remorse into which he could need to cut. An overcast sky, a headstone marking a vacant grave, ceaseless weeping in desolate voices, words of prayer imploring serenity. Present at the center of the many weeping individuals who had gathered for she who had been loved, he could not recall what words he had chosen to speak. The part, the deeply engraved Tiresias nature in them all. What he recalled were remorses, immensely powerful, towering, and unreasonable were Wilhelm's remorses. A child yet unaware of reason, a child who had not been with the mother and father with whom he ought to have been. The words that child had chosen as consideration and consolidation for his own foolhardy self had rejected, unable to accept them. In that moment, dull had turned the sky, the ground, the faces of the people, his own self, the child. It's all right, honored grandfather. When she passed, honored grandmother wasn't the sword saint. That's why the sword saint didn't lose. Please, stop. After all, the sword saint shouldn't ever lose. Father said so. I'm begging you. Please stop. So, don't be so sad. The Estrella family is safe and sound, honored grandfather. Right now. Right here. Please, don't speak of that. Again and again, words of rejection bereft of power. Over and over, words of consolation from a child settled in that which he believed. And then, I'm the next sword saint. Just before honored grandmother passed away, I received it. Stop already! What is it that you want me to say? Do not make me say that it was your fault that Teresia, that your grandmother died. Do not make me say it. Amidst the fated scene, racing aught else, he and the child were made too. Through his immature, foolish self of that day, that moment, Wilhelm trusted the sword and pressed forward. Words that remained forever unspoken would never be imparted on to the other party, even supposing a mutual understanding of feeling between both parties. The thousands, tens of thousands of words that ought have been devoted would never be delivered onto the other party. And likewise, the swords that had ended up being vocalized, no matter the manner in which they had formed, would always end up being imparted onto the other party. How exactly that would be received depended entirely on the capacity of the receiver. But to pour more water than could be deemed acceptable into a yet incomplete container, and blaming that container for overflowing, unable to take it on whole, how foolish of an act would that be? The face of the child, a Reinhardt, in the faded world of that day, he could not recall. After all, once he had let slip words that he ought never have, he had not even been able to look upon his face. It was not that he could not recall it. He did not even know to begin with, for he had failed to look upon it. Thus, those who received those words he had ended up speaking were not confined to that single person. I heard that you were blaming the kid at Mom's funeral service, and yet you still want to see Reinhardt? You can't even make the distinction on what's not fine to say, Dad. And yet you think we've got the right to apologize to it? I don't know if you guys can tell, I was getting really choked up. I mean, I am getting choked up. I'm getting choked up. The way that Reinhardt, oh my god. The weight that Reinhardt has to deal with, I'm not gonna say that it's anywhere close to the weight that Subaru has to deal with, but they're different weights and they weigh different amounts. They're different types of weight and they weigh different amounts. There are certain things that you can tell people and there's certain things that you don't tell people. How will you know if you said something wrong if you said it at a point where you didn't understand the implications of your words, nor your actions for that matter? So, oh my god, dude, this story is so fucking peak. It's so peak, dude. God damn it. I'm trying to not fucking combust. Dude, this shit is so good. Only the real ones were getting emotional during this reading right now. Because damn it. The face of the child of Reinhardt in the faded world of that day cannot recall. Oh wait, I already read that. That child is mine and Luana's child. To say he let mom die? That he stole her divine protection? That's all some sort of misunderstanding. I'll prove it. Nah, this shit's hidden, bro. This shit's hidden. Oh, showing how much Heinkel actually cared about his fucking son, dude. Oh my, bro. I'm not you, Dad. Me. There's something to do no matter what. Once words had been uttered, no longer could they be retracted. Wilhelm's reckless remarks towards Reinhardt had spread in the blink of an eye, even reaching the ears of Heinkel, who had not attended the funeral service, causing him to lose his chance to apologize and explain himself. Concurrently, the foolish reprimand from grandfather to grandchild, has been spread even to those outside of the family. So as a result of that scandal, the truth of the succession of the divine protection of the Sword Saint became widely known. Heinkel had absolutely not allowed Wilhelm to see Reinhardt. Reinhardt had avoided, oh my god, dude. It better not, oh my god, dude. Reinhardt had avoided Wilhelm in accordance with what Heinkel had told him, severing all interaction. Wilhelm had kept his distance from Heinkel and Reinhardt, devoting himself to vengeance by his lonesome. The relationships between those three, in conflict as they were, once more came together due to crossing the corpse soldier Teresia at the Watergate City. And once more, had definitive cracks been born. Were that to be the finale, then it would indeed be a tragic ending. But for Wilhelm, who had opted not to permit Teresia's death, her life, her existence to end in tragedy, he too would chant objections to this relationship drawing to a close as a tragedy. And as for the way to exclaim objections towards the overpowering fate, he knew no method but to exclaim them through his sword. Reinhardt was the Sword Saint. as long as he continued to bear that as an unshakable duty. Never would the chance come around to exchange sentiments with Reinhardt. Present behind the veil of Sword Saint, never would the chance come to restore color to that fated scene. Henceforth, Wilhelm van Estrella, nay, the one who dispossessed Sword Saints of their swords, Wilhelm Trias, had no other choice but to bleed his very life into his sword shimmer. Again, indubitably, that had been a stanza of a battle that would go on to be told in legend. The battle unfolding between Sword Demon and Divine Dragon amounted to the back and forth bout, which a score of factors at its conception, pitting the tempered swordsmanship of steel against the power of an apex lifeform by birth. In the royal capital, the area of the noble district that had become a battleground had been leveled, the collapsed buildings and pulverized streets telling of how tremendous the clash between those individuals present in the same domain, unreachable to any ordinary person. Even considering their body size, the presence or absence of footing, and the trading of their decisive blows, the sword shimmer and the draconic presence were evenly matched. A battle between dragon and man in the current world was a fight to the death of such rarity that whether it would be possible to witness one such event in the span of 100 months or even years was impossible to know. And yet, astonishingly, this made it twice the Sword Demon met a dragon in battle. The gist of that was karma. Karma that cannot be explained by anything but the fact that he had continued to desire to tread upon the most dangerous battlefields in this world, and that the large something that governed fate had continued to provision the Sword Demon with worthy enemies. Considering the preconditions, the Sword Demon had been at an overwhelming disadvantage going into this fight. The slashes of the Sword Demon's twin swords could not pierce the tenacious scales of the Divine Dragon, whereas the Divine Dragon's claws and fangs would easily pluck the Sword Demon's life from his flesh with as much of the slightest grace. The Sword Demon had continued to evade them with techniques employing the most strenuous of his efforts, but he would eventually reach his limit. In theory, that would be so. But just who could possibly imagine the sight of the Sword Demon, stained in blood, covered in white soot, swinging his swords as his back was scorched, using up the last of his strength as he succumbed to the Divine Dragon's talon. The blood-curdling visage of the Sword Demon, the swordly aura so intense that merely being exposed to it from head to toe would cause one to feel as though the edge of the blade had been trained to their life. The swordsmanship hot on the heels of the prime in which he had not defeated the Sword Saint. All of them refuted the natural reality, instilling onlookers with the manifestations of irrational hope and expectation. The Sword Saint was the sword of the kingdom of Lagunica, the bearer of hope. At the time that hope had been unseated by the Sword Demon, the people ought to have despaired, turning to the heavens. The Sword Saint had been defeated, so such a continuation would be logical. However, reality had deferred. Not a single person had lamented the fact that the Sword Saint had been defeated, setting aside their sword. Rather, the masses had blessed it. That had been because a new hope had sprouted. They had begun to harbor new expectations for the sword demon who had bested the sword saint, pursuing strength and strength alone, unable to do anything except hone his own self, much like the steel he had brandished, was the sword demon. The sword demon's direct, unyielding way of being had caused a great many people to raise their visages, instilling them with hope, giving them expectations for the future. Now, in this moment, the impossibility of imagining a future in which the figure of the sword demon would be laid low by the divine dragon was the same as that. In witnessing the sword demon's way of being, people would end up finding hope. So long as there remained a desired scenery for that sword to cut through to, it would instill the belief that it not being reached was not a possibility. Ergo, the battle between sword demon and divine dragon was at a deadlock, with the two involved, each unable to discover a winning move, having been constantly ascertaining how they would excel their opponent in the life or death bout. That was why the progression of the bout between individuals transcendent was performed by neither sword saint nor divine dragon. At the nexus of the townscape, transformed into a theater of war, sword demon and divine dragon crossed gazes, exchanging silence. However, albeit the result was mutual silence, the existence of that silence differed between the two. To one, patience; the other, shock. Both were emotions meriting silence, but what which followed was different. A faint groan, accompanied by great volumes of blood, spilled from the sword demon's mouth. But, with his twin swords yet clasped, the sword demon made no attempt to stifle the overflowing ichor and looked down at his own body. He caught sight of a sword's tip piercing through his abdomen, stained with blood. The blade had entered from behind, perforating the sword demon's torso, causing blood to spill outward. The sword responsible for that act was the sword demon knew well. It was none other than his own former beloved sword. The sword inscribed Astrea, its current owner. Blurred by the frothing of blood in his mouth, he bore no confidence that his mutter had become a definite sound. But, from the quivering of the sword thrust through his body, he understood the intentions that had charged the deed. If he turned around, it was possible that his torso would be torn asunder. Hence, the sword demon gritted his molars and stood his ground. Behind him, while slightly clasping the hilt of the sword that had stabbed the sword demon. With your way of doing things, not you, Dad. For me, this is something I have to do, no matter what. If Wilhelm perma dies, I'm going to fucking crash out. A wrung-out voice it had been, mixed with sobs that seemed to be tearing his chest apart. As he listened to that, the stabbed sword demon took a long, deep exhale and reminisced. The figure of his own child, whose cries brought about by his own self in the midst of training had been cause for his wife to scold him, which in turn had led him to batter his child to bear through the tears. As far back as those times, all odds of victory would be lost upon his child's cries. That had been the deciding blow interrupting the climactic bout between dragon and man, driving the stanza of legend to its coda. This chapter was fucking phenomenal. Dude. I almost fucking broke down a few times. Like, that shit was hard to fucking get through. That was really hard to get through, chat. I'm gonna look at the first line. Okay. Here's something I'm gonna start doing for the novel readings. Once I finish, I'll give like my brief opinion commentary. And then I'm gonna do like the whole wrap up, and then I'll wrap the actual video up by reading the first couple lines of the next chapter. And then I'm gonna continue from there in the next video. So suffice to say, I have like a slightly different perspective of Heinkel right now. And Wilhelm's still the GOAT. Like he's too goated. God, there's so much. There's just absolutely there's too much. I don't even know where to begin. Look, with the whole like, bro, with the Teresia shit, dude, the Teresia shit gets me really fucking emotional. Like, I'm gonna like be a little open with you guys, and there were a lot of people in my life that left, who passed on, and I never got to say goodbye. So that specific topic, that specific element always hits hard for me, because just when you recall those memories of what was, but you can never get it back, and then even over time memories fade, it's like, bro, dude, I can imagine the level of revenge that Wilhelm had and wanted to, you know, act on when Teresia passed. And then hearing the words of a child, which now I know what that means, it was referring to what Reinhardt told him, and just about like his, God, the one who supposedly gave Reinhardt the most ire was Wilhelm in the instant. But dude, no, this shit is so good, bro. What the fuck? Hey, yo, what the fuck? Like, okay. Ah, man. And then Heinkel, knowing or not knowing why and how the divine protection transferred when it did, he still, he still was in Reinhardt's corner. The only person who was like against Reinhardt supposedly was Wilhelm in the beginning, and then they like cut ties just because of what he said at the funeral, even though Heinkel wasn't at the funeral. And I'm like, that's fucking rough, dude. That's fucking rough. Anyway, let me know how you guys feel about the chapter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Hit the notification bell when you subscribe, just so you can stay updated on when I do drop these videos, because like they're gonna be more consistent, but they're going to be sporadically consistent, right? You may miss like a day or two, but I'm gonna consistently get these boys out, and share it with anyone that you think is going to enjoy consuming the ReZero content, enjoy ReZero in general, or just someone that you may think may enjoy like my energy, my vibes. Because we do other things on the channel other than ReZero. Obviously, we stream games. Right now, we're currently playing Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, Dragon Quest XI S, Persona 3 Reload, and it's mostly somewhat Black Myth Wukong. Well, like that's like an off and on game. Sometimes we stream some other shit, but those are the games that we're going to consistently be putting on the channel. So if you guys feel like coming into those streams, make sure you're subscribed so when I go live, you know. And just because you're a ReZero fan or an anime fan doesn't mean you can't pull up and talk shit with me, because either way, I'm going to talk shit about anime, and we talk a lot of shit about a lot of stuff during the stream. So I think the streams are like the best time if you guys like want to interact with me, but we're going to start chapter 29 of Arc 9, Foot of the Table. I'll read this much. Tempestuous wind and land, collisions of preemptive power, as if being composed was truly a new stanza of legend. A blink after the bout between Sword Demon and Divine Dragon, transcending human comprehension, had commenced. In that meager of an instant, Heinkel had tumbled off the dragon's back, ousted from the legend. During their descent from above the clouds, the Divine Dragon had fastened him to a place with wind, but as soon as it had began combat with the Sword Demon, the dragon had lost that consideration. No, that leeway, forcing him to fend for himself, and thus, bearing no fruit whatsoever, Heinkel had been promptly cast off stage. Incapable of even clinging to that back, he fell to the ground, and pitted himself as being a wretched, pathetic disgrace. Even that excessive self-punishment was not permitted to Heinkel at that current moment. The battle that had commenced at the Barrio Villa had already greatly expanded its sage to encompass the noble district. And the extraordinary combat between man and dragon unfolded alongside a fantastical sight, as if it were a daydream. From that, Heinkel had been unable to remove his eyes. In his heart, he wished to look away. Not only did he want to avert his gaze, he wished to turn his back and run away. If that would not come to fruition, then he would hold his head, cower, plug his ears, and reject everything. But he could not do that. As Wilhelm van Astria swung his sword, how Heinkel Astria attempt to avert his gaze? I'll catch y'all the next time, picking right back up off of this. Peace.